Undisputed King of Stars.
Well, we just had the Oscars this past weekend, and the go-to guy is Christian Toto. Hey, what do you know? He's our guest today. So he knows everything there is to know about movies and entertainment. Christian, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Actually, the Oscars are still going on, so they're not quite over yet. They're almost at the end, so that's
right, good. Right. Yeah. They're playing walk-off music now for I don't know, assistant key grip or something like that. Exactly. So, what did you think of the awards show? I did not see them. I've kind of been delinquent on movies ever since I had kids, and I got distracted, and then when I started watching movies again, everything was a superhero CGI, and I was like, okay, I'll wait till this fad passes a little. I didn't see it, but I did see clips on social media, especially on Twitter, and it seemed nice, with the people who won. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm not seeing a lot of controversy. It seems like nice kind of feel-good stories seems to be winning. So what were your thoughts about the show?
That's pretty accurate without even seeing it. It was nice. It was sweet. It was charming, and it wasn't divisive. And I think in recent years, it's almost played down to a caricature of what people on the right worry when it comes to the Oscars. It's going to be full of speeches and lectures and partisan jokes. And it was a little bit of that, but not really. Even Jimmy Kimmel, who's a pretty, partisan fellow on late night, he played it straight. He was charming. He was funny. He was low key. He wasn't a laugh riot. I don't think he's ever been a laugh riot, but he made you feel welcome. It was right from the jump. His monologue was on target, and it was almost subversive the way it kind of recalled the old days. I grew up with the Billy Crystal years when he was the host time and again, and it had a little bit of that sentiment to it. So I enjoyed it. And again, it's way too long. It's not exciting. If you're not a movie buff, there's not a lot to kind of grab onto, but as an Oscar ceremony, not so bad.
Yeah. And also just the stories behind it too. And me being also a fellow person who grew up during the Billy Crystal era, it was great to see Short Round and Brendan Fraser up there on stage. I was like, okay, these are just good people. Jamie Lee Curtis won. It's like, oh, that's kind of nice to see. And yeah, Michelle Yeoh's speech about, hey, women, you're never going to be past your prime. I was like, wow, this feels like such a throwback. And like you say, it's funny how it's almost subversive in just being kind of normal.
Yeah, it's weird that subversive is now normal, but that's the way we are today. It's funny, one of the few digs that Jimmy Kimmel did later in the show against the right side of the aisle was actually improv, because I think there was a teleprompter malfunction, so he had to kind of wing it. And I guess that was on the tip of his tongue. So, but the bottom line is that I think if the show is like this more often, and listen, I don't think it has to be catering to X or Y, but it really should be a celebration. It should be enjoyable. It should be light. And the speeches should be chock full of gratitude. They were. Jamie Lee Curtis got her start in movies like Halloween, and she gave a shout out to genre films. Listen, the Oscars hate genre films. They don't recognize them, they don't look at them. But to have an honoree, a winner, talk about that was wonderful and sweet and unexpected.
Yeah, and I wonder, I think part of it, and I was wondering when I was chatting with my wife about it, because we were like throwing news back and forth. Hey, this person won. And it seemed like, okay, you don't have a Republican in the White House, so you don't need to do the virtue signaling. But it seems like usually they find ways to squeeze that in anyway. And I'm kind of wondering, and you know far better than me on this thing, but you see like Top Gun Maverick, movie of the year, didn't win the award for it, of course, but box office was crazy. Somebody snuck in trying to listen into the audio of Spielberg talking to Tom Cruise about a month ago saying, look, Tom, you saved Hollywood with your one movie. Do you think a lot of people in Hollywood, not everybody, but a lot of people are saying, hey, why don't we actually entertain audiences again? Maybe we'd A, make a lot of money, and B, have fun doing it.
I don't know, and that's a horrible answer, but I will say it doesn't seem accidental that this particular Oscar telecast had the tone it had, that Jimmy Kimmel dialed it back and just told sweet, light jokes. I don't think that happens in a vacuum. So whether there was some sort of, decree from the producers of the show, whether there's a collective sense of, hey, let's just, put on a show and not get in the weeds of all the stuff we've talked about in the past. It's hard to say. You have to really kind of be behind the scenes to know exactly what happened, but it was not accidental. These things just don't happen. So I don't know what led to it, but I think it's good. But I also think that they do themselves a disservice by not even telegraphing that. If Jimmy Kimmel does press before the awards, there are producers who talk to the press as well. If they had kind of alluded to gently, listen, I know in the past it's been a bit political, it's been a bit agenda driven, and for some people they love it and some people they don't. We're going to push past that this year. I think our new mission is kind of go old school. If they kind of shared that, maybe it would have helped more in the ratings. And the ratings did tick up a little bit, but they're still far, far below what they once were not too long ago.
Yeah. And it's something too that everybody can get together and watch. Okay. Well, those were the big awards. Were you surprised at Everything Everywhere All at Once doing so well? Unfortunately, this is why I'm terrible when it comes to movies, and I need to talk to an expert because my wife and I keep wanting to watch it with our college-age daughter, and we keep saying, "Hey, let's watch it on Saturday night," and then, "Oh, sorry, I got plans," and so he heads out, and so I feel like every weekend we're supposed to watch it. We haven't yet. Everybody I know who saw it absolutely loved it.
It had a lot of popular appeal. It was technically an indie style movie, but it made not a huge box office like, Top Gun, but it made respectable cash. Critics enjoyed it. I didn't love it, honestly, but there was no surprise there because one of the things about the Oscars now is that there are a million award shows a day before, a week before.
Right.
Before. So if a movie cleans up and, 8 out of 10 of them, chances are it's going to do pretty well on Oscar night. And that's exactly what the template was. So not too much of a surprise. I think it'd been a shock if anything else won Best Picture, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. So we saw some signs of hope there. Are you seeing signs of hope in production as it rolls forward? Now, if Hollywood decided today, okay, we're going to start focusing on the general audience and not try to browbeat people and lecture people. Over the past few years, we've seen just kind of wokedom run amok. If they just changed their mind today, it would take a while to work through Hollywood. But are you seeing signs of the movies in general? They're trying to say, hey, why don't we open this up a bit, have some fun, or talk about issues that aren't quite as divisive?
I think it's a yes and no answer because there are some positive signs. Also, I think a lot of the economics of the moment are maybe changing things and maybe putting the pressure on because you're seeing some projects that seem to be woke-ish getting canceled either before they hit the screens, large or small, or shortly after they do so. The infamous story about Batgirl being shelved before it was even ready for consumption is still shocking. There were some Netflix shows that were canceled before they got into, post-production. So I think you're seeing elements of that involved, shows that were a bit woke getting canceled, maybe when they should have been canceled instead of extended indefinitely. But at the same time, I think there's a Starsky and Hutch reboot that's coming that's going to be a gender flip. And not that that's
I did hear about that.
Yeah, but I mean, that's been what this sort of mode is. Instead of telling compelling stories with female characters, that's great. Nothing wrong with that. Taking these existing properties and say, well, we'll just make, a woman version of it, which often doesn't work and often feels just a bit precious. So, I think for every step forward, there's a couple steps back. And we'll have to wait and see. I mean, like you said, these things do take time. The wheels of change are slow in Hollywood. And, a movie approved today, it's not going to come out for 2 or 3 years at best. So, I think the more evidence needs to, it needs time before we see it. But I think there are murmurings behind the scenes. I think you can see it in some of the comments in the Oscar show itself. But I also think the more you see successful comedians who are kind of working outside the mainstream really thrive. Russell Brand is going to be working with locals and Rumble on his next comedy special. Andrew Schultz last year just crushed it going independent. Yeah. There was a platform that said, hey, we love you. We want to put you on our platform, but don't tell that joke and don't tell that joke. And he said, hey, bleep you. I'm out of here. Right. I bought the rights back. And he really did well. So I think that may put pressure on Hollywood as well when they see those success stories.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the good kind of competition. Watching that. Now, what do you think, too, pulling back from the politics a little, what do you think about movie going in general? It's been a struggle. We, of course, had COVID, which just thrashed the industry. Everybody locked in their homes. now people are getting a little more used to it. When Tenet came out, they weren't quite ready yet, but now it seems like, okay, now we'll hit the theaters. How do you think the old time movie experience, going out, seeing a movie, do you think it's going to be okay in the long run?
I think it will be with reservations. I think we saw late last year, well, the pandemic really isn't an issue of consequence now. A lot of big time Oscar movies just absolutely tanked. The Fablemans did not make much money. Bones and All didn't. Till made no money. Tar made no money. Banshees of Inisherin, excuse me. All, these are quality films. People stayed away in droves. I think what you're seeing now is more escapism really kind of clicking at the box office. Horror is doing a killing. I mean, movies like Megan, the new Scream film, Barbarian from last year. I think that genre is really what we need right now. And I think we also need just escapism, period. Cocaine Bear has been a surprise hit, and that's done well. Creed 3 is really enjoyable and old school in a way, and that's doing very well at the box office. So I think you're seeing signs of hope, but the signs of hope are coming from movies that are just sheer entertainment. They're not woke. They're not serious. They're not sober. It's not what I call eat your vegetables movie going, where you're like, oh, I know it's going to be good for me. I'll see it. No, people are exhausted. They're worried about their careers, worried about the economy. They just want to go and just get away. And I think movies like Cocaine Bear, it's no Oscar winner, but it scratches the itch, and that's what we want.
Well, and then you also had a lot of crossover success for a movie made in India, like RRR. I guess that's all you do to pronounce it, but which is obviously just pure crazed escapism. There's a movie being finished myself. There's a movie coming out called Sisu, which talk about Oscar bait. It's just basically an old man Finn, not like me at all, going total John Wick on Nazis. I went, okay, now that's the kind of movie I want to go watch.
Yeah, and there's a John Wick movie coming soon as well, so we get more about Keanu Reeves. I think at some point Hollywood really needs to look at what's successful, what's not successful, and recalibrate what they're doing, what they're offering. And again, it does take time, but I get the sense some of this is coming through. The message is being received. I don't think we're seeing it on the late night programs. I don't think we're seeing it on Saturday Night Live, which just continues to be relentlessly one-sided in a way that just breaks my heart. I loved that show growing up. As a little boy, I'd beg my mom, wake me at 11:30 on Saturday night. I don't care if you're sleeping. I've got to watch Mr. Bill, the claymation puppet.
Yeah.
And then she'd always let me sleep because she's a mom, and that's what moms are supposed to do. But to see that show as rebellious and cantankerous and edgy as it once was, and now I barely recognize it. So I really hope that maybe some of the changes we're talking about filter in. And, I think if you're right of center, you don't need to say, okay, there's no Trump jokes. It's all about Biden. We want to hit both sides. And I think that's often the best humor. And I think South Park's ability to endure year after year and just knock out of the park is a great example of that.
Yeah, I was recommended, I was on YouTube about 2 weeks ago, and it recommended some compilation of Don Rickles videos. It just over the years from like the 60s, 70s, 80s. And it's just so alien almost. It's like, well, we should put this in a time capsule, because you have Don Rickles insulting Republicans, Democrats, blacks, whites, himself most of all, and everybody having so much fun with it and basically begging him to insult them in particular. So I was like,
wow. I'm in the front row.
Right. Yeah, it's like, wow, have times changed? And it was just almost jarring to watch it. It's like, I'm surprised YouTube hasn't, I don't know, put adults only warning on it or something.
You want to talk about jarring? I've been rediscovering South Park with my son. He's 14, maybe a little young, but I'm watching it with him.
Yeah.
That's my excuse.
Yeah.
Jaw-dropping what they got away with then. The fact that it's still allowed to be shared and displayed now. I mean, I don't use those terms loosely. I'm just amazed. And they've touched upon trans issues and freedom of speech and lots of really cultural hot button areas that you won't go near today. I don't even know if the show could do it again today. But back in the 2000s, they got away with it. And I think just having these cute cartoon animated things that look so crude and so defenseless in a way go there. It makes it palatable. It's fascinating, but it really does speak to the culture.
Well, and that's something too, where the creators of South Park, they have completely insulated themselves from the industry. They own their content. They do their own thing. They're buying Mexican restaurants in Denver. They're like, look, this is fun. This is what we like, and nobody's going to tell us no. And as you mentioned, Andrew Schultz, Russell Brand. Before that, we've had, Louis C.K., who kind of had to do this for other reasons. But what has the whole streaming revolution done? There's platforms like Rumble that are already there. There's people can set up their own website. But boy, if I am a middle-aged Hollywood exec looking at this saying, oh, how do I keep up with the cool kids? I'd be terrified about this development, that they can say, look, you cannot give me notes. I'll give you notes. And if not, I'll do my own thing.
Or you can say, hello, Ryan Long, Andrew Schultz, and Joe Rogan. We're doing a buddy comedy. It's a road trip movie. It is off the wall. We want you guys to be the stars, and we're going to let you run wild, and we're going to see what happens. I mean, I think there's opportunity there, even for the mainstream. I mean, I think there's a real hunger for that kind of inappropriate humor, because at the end of the day, you mentioned Don Rickles. Do you think that he was mean and vicious and hated people of color?
Yeah.
I think he just wanted to make people laugh, and he was outrageous. I mean, I think you could really sense through the years that was shtick, that was not what he meant, that he really loved when everyone laughed, and he wanted everyone to be there. And he thought that making fun of everyone was the way to bring everyone together. So I think you can really sense when a comedian is trying to be vicious, and you can sense when a comedian's just trying to make you laugh. And comedians need that rope. They need the ability to kind of say, hey, you know what? That joke did stink. I'm going to retool it or just crush it for my set. But maybe next time I'll tell it this way with this inflection and this word. It might be great.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can make all the difference as well. And I've always loved the comedians anyway. You can usually tell if it's mean or not. It's just not funny to me. And I've watched comedy like wake me up to see Saturday Night Live. I was completely that kid. Always loved comedy. But I've always loved the comedians who play, they're probably really smart, like Norm Macdonald, but they pretend they're the dumbest guy in the room. Half the jokes are their own expense. And then that kind of gives them leave to laugh at other people, make weird observations. It's like, ooh, I can't believe he went there. But he can just go, hey, look, I'm just the dumb guy, but you can tell there's no malice behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's also something that's legitimately inclusive. Joe Coy is an Asian American comedian, and he does a lot of jokes about his family, and he's picking on his mom sometimes, but he loves his mom. He loves the culture. And I think people in the audience who may be of a similar background, they want to be in on the joke. They want to laugh at themselves. They want to kind of recognize, oh gosh, that's me. That's my aunt that does all those crazy things, but I love her to death, and her food is amazing. I mean, I think it's, in a way, it's divisive to say, okay, we're not going to make fun of this group or that group. We'll do here, here, and here. And then you'll just sit in the audience and think, oh, they're never going to speak to me, even if they're poking fun of me. It's a weird dynamic.
Yeah. And also too, when you have, let's say, for lack of a better term, woke comedy, when you have that, there is an acid touch to it. Something just watching online, you would see impersonations of Donald Trump, for instance. Some hilarious, some like Alec Baldwin. You could just tell he despised Donald Trump, so it wasn't fun. It wasn't silly. It wasn't funny. And I can understand not liking him, oh, he's too brash, whatever. But you almost need something, and kind of throw back to Dana Carvey or something when he did George H.W. Bush. It was silly. It was just like, Dana Carvey's making fun of Bush, and he's making fun of mannerisms, and he's laughing with the audience, and he's making fun of himself, and everybody's just in on it and enjoying it. When you can tell that a presenter, a host, an impersonator despises the person they're making fun of, it's just ugly. It just feels kind of icky. And that goes for anybody who's purportedly, quote unquote, on my side. And, hitting Biden or hitting Kamala. There's just like an ugliness where it's like, this isn't fun.
And conversely, there are comedians out there like Maya Rudolph does Kamala Harris. I mean, no one does Harris at this point because they don't go near her. But it's almost a celebratory impression where it's, oh, she's great and she's wonderful and she's such a groundbreaker. Well, that's not really entertaining either. It's also toothless. I mean, you do, when a David Carvey comes at you there is some truth there. He is making some points, either, mocking Bush's milquetoast demeanor or some of his rhetoric. I mean, there's a nice balance there between that's funny, it's not super cruel, but yeah, I didn't realize that Bush was doing that. That's kind of interesting. It made me think about it. And the best comedians make us think, they challenge us, and they can go into subjects where normally you can't. You can't even discuss it. If you make it funny and you make it thought-provoking, that's comedy at its best.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so we've gone through the award season cycle. What do you look at coming up for this year? Any summer blockbusters you see? What are you excited about coming out the rest of this year?
It seems like Tom Cruise is on a hot streak. He rarely has bombs. I think The Mummy from a couple of years ago was a stark exception. That was terrible. So he's got the new Mission Impossible film. He's been teasing it for a while. It's a two-parter. He's teaming with a lot of the same creative people behind the scenes. So I can't not but look forward to that. I'm really worried about the new Indiana Jones movie and the Dial of Destiny. Harrison Ford was the movie star of my era growing up. I love him to death. I wish I looked as hardy as he does at 80, but he's 80 and he shot it when he was in his late 70s. And I just, to have such a rugged hero as Indiana Jones, as an older gentleman, I mention this, and I do my best not to be cruel, because I don't want to be cruel. It's not who I am, but it makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable, or I worry that they'll be able to carry off this character. And of course, the shadow of the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is weighing over everything. We know that movie was disappointing. Right. So, yeah, I don't know. There's an Oppenheimer film from director Christopher Nolan, and everything he does is engaging. I don't know what Tenet was. I don't think I could watch it a dozen times and figure it out, but I still want to see a Christopher Nolan film. So that's coming later I guess late in the summer, I think.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, since I was, I won the Cold War single-handedly in my one tour of duty in the Navy.
You for your service.
And yeah, my job was manipulating atoms. So I went, ooh, I want to see that one right when I saw it. But again, it's Christopher Nolan. So yeah, he's not an actor, but he's a star name too. It's like, okay, I want to see what that person does. Like, he has a brand like the Coen brothers do, or something like that. It's like, okay, I'll see that. What do you think about the entire superheroification of so many blockbusters? I loved Iron Man, came out, loved it, loved a couple sequels and Thor, and this is fun. And as it got through the cycle, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I remember enjoying Doctor Strange, the first Black Panther, and then when they had whatever the final Avengers movie was, I told my wife, I have to announce I'm divorcing Marvel, and it's just like, I'm done. I need something new. Do you think they will carry on? You still have a lot and I think they can carry on, but boy, I think they just got a little bit oversaturated in the market with DC competing against Marvel, etc.
Yeah, there's a lot of different forces here. One, the quality is certainly diminished. Secondly, we get a new superhero film every other day. I'm exaggerating, but only slightly. I think even the Disney boss is saying we're going to dial that back a bit. The charismatic figures, the Chris Evans, the Robert Downey Jr.'s, they've kind of stepped back and essentially retired. So you have sort of a new crop of heroes, and they're not as strong. And, these movies make an enormous amount of money, but they cost an enormous amount of money. So if Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania makes maybe 220 stateside and maybe the same overseas, that's seen as unsuccessful. So, you got to really kind of calibrate what's going on here. And I think one of the reasons why I think the horror genre is so vibrant is that you don't need to spend $200 million on the movie. You don't need mega stars to power it. You need, 20 to 30 million, maybe a familiar face or two at best, and a great concept. And I think that sort of return on investment is huge. So listen, any superhero movie is going to make cash, but if it doesn't make enough, then I think they're going to really start to rethink what's going on. I think that's starting to happen here. We'll have to wait and see.
And also too, my wife and I watched Nope. We love Jordan Peele. I thought Us was a bit of a tangle, a mess. Adored Get Out. Thought that was great. Nope. It was good. It wasn't great, but I thought it was a fun movie. It was good and it was interesting. And the thing that you say, that's more thriller or chiller than horror, but it's kind of like sci-fi or fantasy. It allows you to kind of investigate big questions, but you don't need to spend $80 bazillion doing it. You could just say, oh, here's a weird idea. Why don't you run with that? Spend, a more modest sum, and you'll easily make that back. And it's like, oh, with our kind of crazed distribution we have here with streaming and so forth, these things, any kind of genre film is going to find its audience.
Yeah, and just a quick note, there's been stories in the press recently about there's a new romantic comedy. I think it's by Nancy Meyer. Nancy Meyer's, I'm kind of bungling the name, but she did Something's Gotta Give, and it's complicated. She's done some good films, some good rom-coms. It's her genre. Well, the price tag is anywhere between $100 to $130 million to make that movie, and it's kind of in flux right now. I think Netflix passed on it. Why in the world do you need to spend that much money on that kind of movie? That is absurd. And again, you don't need the big stars anymore because they don't guarantee fannies in the seats. I love Scarlett Johansson. I think she's amazing. I think she's a great actress. She's beautiful. She's not going to guarantee your movie successful. It just doesn't work that way. And how Hollywood can't figure out how to make a rom-com and keep the budget lower is a mystery as big as the Sphinx. So I don't know what's happening behind the scenes, but I guarantee you could pluck an indie director and he or she could say, I can do that for 10 million, So I think there has to be a rethinking of what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Christian Toto, thanks so much for being on. We really appreciate it. Once again, you're the go-to guy, expert when it comes to entertainment media. Where can people find you on radio, online? Tell us more.
Well, I like to keep my opinions to myself mostly, but no. I've got a podcast. It is Reborn, the Hollywood and Toto podcast. Talks about the culture, talks about free speech, talks about big tech censorship. And I'm interviewing a lot of interesting people. I don't think they're the big stars as of yet. Tom Hanks is not signed on to my show to appear, but I'm talking
his loss, I say.
I agree. Comic book artists who have been censored, comedians who maybe don't get their stuff on TikTok because they're saying the wrong kind of jokes. So that kind of material is on my podcast. I hope people check it out. And also, I'm really looking forward to talking to people across the aisle to get some left of center talented people to say, hey, let's have a debate about what's going on in the culture in Hollywood. No meanness, no anger, no, storming off. But I want to really have those kind of conversations. So that's going to be part of it. And then, of course, my website is hollywoodintoto.com.
Okay, everybody check that out. He's been a stalwart go-to, and he understands the conservative perspective without saying all you have to do is blow off Hollywood, avoid any pop culture unless it adores Republican issues. It's just very good to see and a very valuable resource. So Christian Toto, thanks so much for being on.
My pleasure. I love your work.